pull up my PowerPoint here and from the beginning. Can you all see that? Leipzig, we are good?
Yes, I see your objectives. Yes. There you
Excellent.
go. Okay, title slide is on. Yeah.
Okay, very good. And we've already gone through this one. All right, perfect. All right, let's get started. Hi, everybody. I'm Debbie Holbrook. I direct forensic nursing services for all of Baltimore City, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes because it's a big venue here in an urban area. But I am a country girl. I started forensic nursing in the early 90s in Seaford, Delaware, very rural area in the trauma department. I have a history of critical care work, and that's where I started forensic nursing. That's where I started using ALS many years ago in '94, and then I was recruited to Baltimore City in 2007 to run things here. I've testified on Capitol Hill a few times for the President's DNA Initiative, the DNA Justice Act, Debbie Smith Act. I have a lot of work with legislation. I am the immediate past president of the Academy of Forensic Nursing, so just stepping down out of that role after 8 years in that organization. And I am a fellow in the American Academy of Nursing, where I am Magnet Nurse of the Year a few years ago. So it's a little bit about me and who's talking to you today. So one of the things that we're going to do, and one of the things I want you to know, is that I come from a clinical background, and I've conducted and overseen over 10,000 cases using ALS. So that's where I'm coming from, right? As a clinical expert in the use of this technology. And we're going to talk about its benefits, its limitations, all different things about it. And I'm going to try not to make it real technical as far as what ALS is, because I'm not the designer of the units, certainly. And I'm also not going to make the research real technical. But I want you to know that there's something behind it, and there's challenges to it as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is, this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about the background of the research for ALS. I'm going to talk about basic principles of how it works. It's just pretty much a light. And we're going to talk about some practical use and limitations of this technology. So basically, it's a flashlight. It's a flashlight that's got all the wavelengths. And when you focus in on certain bands of light, you can see things better. And every company makes a unit that focuses on certain wavelengths, certain bandwidths, if you will, that they have chosen. And we'll talk about what that means. Now, I'm going to talk about it in relation, as we start here, to strangulation, because most of the work that I published, most of the work that we've used it for, and most of the studies have involved this work with strangulation cases. So I just want to talk to you real briefly, in case you're not medically inclined, to just talk about what strangulation is. So strangulation is compression of the neck structures externally, not internally. So it's your jugular veins, your carotid arteries, possibly your trachea. It is not hanging, and it is not suffocation, even though it could have the same effect on the brain with anoxia and not getting enough oxygen. That's not what is known as strangulation. Now, what we see in trauma cases is most often manual strangulation, right? The hand, one hand, two-handed, throttling, chokehold, right? Or we're going to see ligature with a cord, a rope, a belt, patient's own clothing, and that's also known as garroting. Now, what strangulation is not is choking. Choking, it happens in the inside, right? That's internally. That's when you get a piece of hot dog caught in your throat. That's where you get a piece of food caught. That is not what strangulation is. However, the vast majority of our patients will say they were choked out. In the rural setting or in the urban setting, it doesn't matter. Patients are patients across this line. And so we have been able to help explain in judicial processes the difference between what choking is and how sometimes laymen will say, I was choked out, but it doesn't necessarily mean something went down their throat. So there's 4 variables in strangulation or in any wound that's considered like a bruise. How much force is applied, where that force is applied, how long it's applied, and the surface area, whether it was just one little area or a very, very broad area. Let me talk a little bit about what a bruise is. So you all know what a bruise is. Every single one of you can look at your body and tell where you've got a bruise, maybe what caused it. Maybe you're not sure what caused it when you take a shower one night, but it's blunt or squeezing trauma that results in superficial discoloration because you break and rupture capillaries, or these tiny blood vessels that are beneath the skin. And the skin itself isn't broken, like it's not abrased or incised or cut or torn, but it's also known as a contusion. It may have pain, it might not have pain. It might be bruised, discolored, and it might have gone away. The color may have disappeared. It might be indurated or hard, right, to the touch, but that's basically what a bruise is. So let's talk about looking at a bruise. Depends on a lot of things. How much blood actually escaped before you clotted, right? How it spread, where on the body the impact was, the depth of where the bleeding is. Might not come to the surface. It may come to the surface, but you can't see it real well. How old is a victim, right, or a patient? How old is the wound? The pigmentation and how well you can see it in a darkly pigmented patient, whether they're on anticoagulants. All these are factors in bruising, but it can be very normal not to be able to see a bruise really, really well. And it also can be very normal not to be able to take a picture or even a light bruise that you can see because of white light, and it kind of obliterates it and you can't see it real well. Sometimes see it just barely with your eye, but not so much when you're taking the picture. So again, deep bruises may take a while to work through the tissues of the skin before they can get up to the surface. It might happen, it might never happen. And this is what happens. And we're going to do a fun little case study at the end. So remember this, right? Remember this, because it will apply to that fun little case study. So blood vessels break, if they break, right? Those capillaries rupture, and they release erythrocytes. And these erythrocytes break down to release hemoglobin. And that hemoglobin breaks down to release bilirubin. Now, there is no science to dating a bruise. You can say that bruises are newer or older than each other. Best research we're going to talk about today in bruise studies that I've been able to find anyway. And it shows you can't date bruises. But what we know is those red and purple bruises are newer. They're your erythrocyte. And as they start breaking down into the green and the yellow, where that bruise, what happens to that blood is it's carried away as a waste product. It's going to start getting green or yellow. That's when it's breaking down to hemoglobin and bilirubin, and that's what you're seeing. So remember that for the end. One of the best research articles was done by Gail Strack and McLean and Hawley. McLean and Hawley were physicians. They were medical examiners. And Gail Strack was an attorney in San Diego. I think she still is. And what their study showed is sentinel. It's always going to be relevant, even though it isn't within 5 or 10 years, because it's what's really been a factor in understanding the wounds of strangulation. And what they found was that 97% of strangulations are manual. Okay, most are with the hand. And 90% of these won't show visible markings or will show very, very, very light visible markings that you can't see it very well. 3% are ligature of strangulations, and 90% of those will show visible markings. And why we're going to talk about a little bit. Why don't we see more visible injury or see it darker or really, really pronounced very well after a known strangulation? We can have witnessed strangulations on video or witnessed by a witness, a person who's a witness to something happening, and still not see it very well or to be able to take pictures of it very well on our patient population. Well, folks, it's physics. If you look at pictures 2 and 3 here, on that small blunt force trauma that will cause an intradermal bruise that you can see pretty well with the naked eye because it's small blunt force trauma, versus that larger blunt force trauma that may do a bruise, but you might not be able to see it necessarily at the level that you're looking at the skin, or see it really very well. That's where we're going to talk about ways that we can penetrate the skin a little bit to see what absorbs and what doesn't. It's as simple as that. The physics is as simple as that. If I were to run, and I'm a little older now, so it wouldn't be pretty, but if I was to run across the room into a bare wall that did not have a light switch or anything protruding from it, I could generally run into that wall for an hour over and over with my upper arm and possibly not bruise unless I'm on an anticoagulant. What's the rationale for that? The energy is dispersed into the broad surface of that wall, and it's dispersed into the broad surface of my arm. It may or not rupture a capillary that I can see with the naked eye. It may be sore as all get out, but I might not be able to see a bruise or see it really, really well. Versus, let me run into the corner of a desk or hit my leg on a coffee table with my shin, or run into a door jamb, right? Where all that energy is focused, focal energy, into one specific area that might tend a higher level of rupturing a capillary, right? That's what you have in ligature, right? The hand doesn't have a lot of power by individual fingers, but as a whole, when it goes across the neck, it may, if a thumb hits the mandible, it may leave a good bruise that you can see. We see that often. But this part of it may not necessarily leave dark bruises that you can see really easily because it's a broad surface on a broad surface. And that's where this physics sort of takes place. That makes sense. So, how might we visualize these wounds in a different way and with better detail? And that's what I want to talk about today. So I want to talk about what ALS is in a very basic form, and some of the research behind it, and some of the practical applications, and some pictures showing you. And you make your own decision whether this is something you want to or can use in your environments. And so we have a lot, I will say we have a lot of environments using ALS compared to what we did in the 90s. And so that's exciting. So let me talk about the strangulation project that we had here in Baltimore. When I came to Baltimore in 2007, I'm from Baltimore, and we moved when my children were tiny out to the farmland, into the rural world. And that's where I did most of my work in nursing. So I'm a city girl, but I'm also a country girl now, so for many years. So I get both. But I moved back to the city, super comfortable here, to run a program that now is 32 years old here. It started just after I started mine in Delaware, and had 34 nurses, and we've got full-time staff, we've got part-time staff, we've got a medical director, Dr. Jackson and I published together, we've got also on-call staff, lot. We have 12 hospital systems, including all of Johns Hopkins, all of University of Maryland, shock trauma. I will tell you that the docs, some of the docs at university are using ALS as well. This isn't just a forensic nursing thing. It's also law enforcement, and it's family justice centers, especially in New York City. It is a lot of different environments, but primarily, I'm going to talk to you about how we use it in these institutions. We have all the hospitals in the city. We have all the nursing home and skilled nursing facilities because we're a fully mobile unit. We have all the prisons and penitentiaries. We have all the military bases in Maryland and just beyond. And we also have the U.S. Naval Academy where we do exams, and the university and some high school wellness centers. So we have a very broad area. That's why we need a lot of staff, because, a lot of crime, a lot of staff. We do everything from soup to nuts when it comes to interpersonal violence. If one person comes into a contact with another person in a harmful way, we're called in some way to do these cases. So we do sexual assault, we do domestic and all interpersonal violence, bar fights after a Ravens game. If adult protective is called, our forensic nursing team is called in to work that case for APS. Institutional abuse, neglect, and maltreatment, vulnerable populations, strangulations. We won the Presidential Award for our Blue Dot initiative, which is a national model in human trafficking coordinated community response. And so that's a real big deal, especially since a lot of our human trafficking patients are indeed strangled and strangled frequently. We also see perpetrators of all major crimes, drug-facilitated assaults, and asylum affidavits to federal judges for TNU visas. And we have a clinic as well, because we also noted that 90% of people weren't doing follow-up with their advanced care provider. So we now also have a clinic within our program. So this led to this strangulation project, and we're using ALS. And what we're doing with ALS is it doesn't determine diagnosis of a bruise, but it's all in the pictures for trier of fact to make that determination on what they see and what they believe, and how in totality, with the whole forensic medical interview and pictures and examination and leading to crisis intervention, those pictures are included. So the judges start seeing them and they don't get it. They don't know what this is. So they called me in for a bench training. A bench training was 8 minutes with all the circuit court judges in Baltimore City. Now, I want to tell you, as somebody who's testified in front of C-SPAN on Capitol Hill, at least you get 15 minutes. 8 minutes was a bit of a challenge to teach strangulation and ALS, but they ended up keeping me for an hour because they were so intrigued by alternate light. And what it led is to them requesting this training for all the district and circuit court attorneys, all the felony crime detectives and family crime detectives, and at the police academy level. And so basically we just talked to them, right? We just talked to them about what I'm talking to you about, a little bit more in depth. And what ALS is and what its limitations are. So that's basically where I'm coming from today as I talk to you about it. Folks, it is a flashlight. It is a flashlight with white light that also has some dials or buttons or settings, depending upon what unit you use. For the manufacturer has chosen some wavelengths that they're pulling out and filtering all the rest of the bands of light. And that's what I'm going to talk to you a tiny bit about, is what those bands of light are, and the settings that we generally see wounds, newer wounds or older wounds, and where we have absorption. Because we don't call something a bruise, we're just going to call it an area of absorption. So what is it? It's a powerful light that has ultraviolet, visible, infrared components within an electromagnetic spectrum, right? So it's all that violet to red wavelengths that you can see. That's known as white light. It is 200 to 700 wavelength. If you look at with your light bulb, that's what you've got. You've got white light. And then what these units do is they filter it down by color bands, and you can choose 380 or 450 or 520, whatever they've chosen. But understand that it's not just 480. It's generally about 20 nanometers in front of it and 20 behind it. So 480 will actually be 460 to 500, but it's still all good because it's just still that band of light, and everything else bright and white has been filtered out. The better the power, the better the results. So if you've tried these little $20 flashlights and you shine them on somebody and maybe you get fluorescence and maybe you don't, it's the quality of what you're using sometimes. It's got to be strong enough. If you're talking about penetrating a few, layers of skin, it's got to be a strong enough wavelength and power source to do that. So that's where it gets into some affordability for some programs. Hope that makes sense. What is alternate light? In the UV range, again, you've got that 380 generally on our light sources to 700 wavelength, that violet to red range. Okay. You go out in the sun and you're getting 800 and 900s that are dangerous to you. We would never use that on a patient. So we don't have that even as a setting. Our units don't go high, that I use don't go higher than 620. 620 is plenty to be able to see what we want to show in a forensic exam. So that's just what the bands of light are that we tend to use. How's light work? It interacts. And remember this, because what we call this is the Stokes shift. So when I talk to you about the Stokes shift, that's what this is. You've got transmission where it's going to go through something and penetrate, or maybe if it's clear, go all the way through it. And then you've got things that are absorbed, and then you've got reflection and transmission, right? So all different bouncing around, and that level of activity is what you call the Stokes shift. And I'm going to slide a minute on that. Blood will never fluoresce, right? Anybody into crime shows? What do you spray on blood splatter on the walls to make it glow? Luminol, to bind with that protein so that when you shine an alternate light source on it, it'll glow. Blood will always absorb. It will always look dark, whether it's on a wall or a table or on your hand or your body, or just beneath the levels of the skin where there may be some kind of a wound. It's always going to absorb. So I don't need to call something a bruise. I'm going to say it's an area absorption. Okay. So I can see that generally under the 400 wavelengths and definitely under the 500 and 600 wavelengths. So how do you visualize? Either things glow, right? They fluoresce, or they absorb, which looks dark, or you've got oblique lighting. And this is sort of what I don't use this in forensic exams. Crime scene investigators will use this. Folks looking for bodies in a desert may use this, where you're looking for bones that may have that oblique lighting that'll pick it up, right? I don't use it in my clinical settings. It's more of a crime scene feature. So when we talk about research, which get yourself ready, because I know research is kind of dry. I'm going to try to make it a little bit more exciting, but we talk about the Stokes shift. And a lot of these researchers, a lot of these doctors that have done their research and published it, talk about the Stokes shift. And that is this state of excited light, right? Where you've got all this transmission and reflection and absorption and all this going on. That's that Stokes shift range. So it kind of makes sense when you hear me talk about that. So again, light strikes, it absorbs, it reflects, it transmits, or some of all of it. Now, I started out my career as an X-ray tech many, many years ago. So my experience and my physics and all my training back in the day was in X-radiation, right? It's not a whole lot different with light. It's the same thing. It is absorbed, reflected, or transmitted. Same with X-radiation. The initial interaction is between a photon of light and electrons that are bound to the atoms of a surface. Okay, that's technically what's happening in that excited phase. So what is ALS? Guys, it's just a flashlight with bands of light, period. Some of them are narrow, some of them are wider. That's all this is. It's very simple. It's no calibration. It's nothing like that. It's just a light. You all know what alternate light source is. Everybody on this call knows what alternate light source is, because what you see here is a black light, right? What happens when you shine a black light on something, a substance, clothing, whatever? It glows or it fluoresces. Some things do. Sometimes fibers or particles, sometimes the white. If you grew up in the 60s and 70s like I did, black lights were part of your life with the lava lamps back then, so you just grew up with them. That's generally the upper 200 and 300 wavelengths. So you all know what a black light is. In forensic settings, we've always used this. So we could see semen, maybe, or we could see saliva, or we could see lubricants, and it might help guide us to where to swab if we saw things glowing on the body. So that's how in the not to say primitive, but in the pioneering use of ALS, that's how we used it. So this is a semen specimen. Semen looks like this a lot when I shine lights on clothing or in somebody's body. And this is saliva. The unit that we used, and this I don't know if there's CEs attached to this, but let me just do a disclaimer. I don't endorse one unit or another as long as it's a very strong power source. And at the time that I started doing my work, this happened to be, I tried 11 different or 12 different units. And this happened to be the strongest power source at the time, was the Specs, Hariba Specs one. So not endorsing it, just saying it's what we used. And on the front of it, we would use, there was a dial on the top of it. And you could dial between 300 to 600 wavelengths in 5 or 6 different settings. And so this is what primarily we used to do our work with. We have really advanced in the ALS that we use now. So let's talk about the imaging. And the top picture is
Debbie,
using a, yes.
I'm sorry. Before you move on any further, we had someone ask, what does Stokes mean?
There was somebody, I believe it was named after somebody who described the Stokes shift. And to be honest, I don't know. I think maybe the person's name was Stokes. I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah, but that's what's referred to as the Stokes shift and that light. But I'll look that up because you know what? I've never ever looked that up before. So good question. Any other questions?
Not right now. I don't
Got it.
think.
All right. One quick question. You don't see my face on the screen in the middle of my diagrams here, do you?
I mean, your camera is on. We do see you talking.
But is it in the middle of a picture?
No.
Okay, good. Perfect. That's all I needed to know because I don't want to move it if I don't need to. So what you see in the top picture is a area of absorption, a linear area absorption with white light. And in the bottom picture, you're able to see it with ALS. Now, you're able, if you've got it and it's not on an even spot, it's the side of your arm, or in a mortise view, or an oblique view, or if it's something that's not straight on. Same way with taking a picture, you'll get distortion. So you want to do it straight on top of what you're seeing, and that's an even spot. And so you're able to see just how you can see something with white light and how you're able to see it below with an alternate light source, maybe in a 400 range. Now it's bright light. And so we wear goggles, right? Which filters it down even more to be able to see things that you just can't see with the naked eye. So you wear goggles, yellow, orange, or red. And what we do with our program and our practice is I'm going to use every wavelength that I have, and I'm going to use every set of goggles that I have, because that way, if I don't see something in 400, I might see it in 5. I might not see it at all. Doesn't matter. But I've used all wavelengths in all goggles. And that comes into factor with some of the camera sources at the end when I talk about photography. So that's where that comes into play. So where does using all the wavelengths matter? Well, this is in a crime lab. They may have a sock, all right? And they've been told that they have reason to believe that there is some type of a biologic specimen on that sock. But they can't see it with white light, okay? They can't see it. It just looks like a white sock. They can't see it with 495 up there in the left. It looks orange. But look at what you're able to see down below at 530 wavelengths, where you're seeing these circular areas of biologic specimen. Helps them understand what to cut out and what to test, because they're going to where the specimen is. Okay, so from a crime scene perspective, it matters a lot whether it's on a person's body or whether it's on a specimen, that you use lots of different wavelengths and goggles to be able to see things. This is a picture of somebody's leg. Okay, The picture on the left is what you see with white light. It is a purplish or dark bruise from an area of known trauma. Okay, that's what you're seeing there with some kind of a linear marking going through it. Look what you're able to see at 445 and at 495 wavelength. Okay, that's that band of light. Everything else is filtered out. You can see it better. Not saying something wasn't there to start. You could see it on the first picture, but you're able to see it better and define it better with a different kind of a light that you're looking at it under. So again, simplest form, that's all this does. Now, what if you have someone who has known trauma to their neck, where you're seeing erythema, maybe some redness in a linear pattern on their neck? There's a video of them being strangled or being struck on their neck. They've got a history of it. They're a good historian to what happened. They got some tenderness there. And then I shine the light at 460 wavelength. And what I'm able to see is what you're seeing here. And that is these linear markings of absorption to the neck, right? I can see them barely when I took a picture in advance, but I mean, when I examined them in advance, but I couldn't see it when I took the picture with white light. But look how it just stands out, and they're areas of absorption. And they're linear. So if a trier of fact brings it in totality to say, yep, this patient said this happened to them, there's some redness in exactly that pattern that I'm able to see. I've got patients saying they've got a 3 on a 10 scale of tenderness to the region, and I've got some linear areas absorption. That's for them to decide what that is, right? My world says it's probably a wound, but that's for them to put that together. Now, how else does this work for all of us? Within our community system, that means an interdisciplinary system. This is clearly a strap mark, right? It is red. It is probably recent, maybe within 12 plus hours. Then there is one off to the side as well, right in the middle of that goes off to the side. Now you're able to see a tiny bit of pattern, but look at it at 480 wavelength with the ABFO ruler, that right angle ruler. And look at the level of detail that you're able to see of what caused that. How's this benefit our law enforcement is that when they go for a search and seizure warrant, they might not be able to get every strap in the house, but they can take something that looks like that pattern. And when they get that pattern, they were able to get this belt that matched. They were able to take that to the crime lab. They were able to swab that, get epithelial cells from the victim, and that was in totality part of their case. So again, it helps define wounds that you can see better.
Yeah,
Now,
we had a question. Do you mind going back? I think it was 3 slides ago. One right there. What does someone was asking what the LP and BP mean after the wavelength or the LP there?
They're long bands. That's I'm not deep into the technology of it. I'm sorry.
No worries. No, that's okay.
I work in the world of the nanometers, right? I work in that clinical world of nanometers where I don't do all the when we do a deep training in ALS, and I have people who come in who are scientists in that field who design these units, they go much deeper into that than I will. But there's long band passes, and so this is a long band pass in that range.
Someone actually just chatted me and said long pass and band pass filters.
Yeah.
So, okay. Thank you.
That's what I was inferring, but I can't. I'm sorry, guys. I'm a clinician. Yeah, I'm a clinical specialist. I'm not a scientist, but I can tell you that is what it is. And they're just different differences in the way of describing it. Okay, this picture I think is where we were. What about the picture on the left? This is white light. So this is a patient who was had ligature. They were tied up, and there is a linear marking to the right side of that round bruise. They did have numerous down here. I don't know if you can see my cursor or not. This was a fingertip-like bruise. This was, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this is where the ligature was.
We can see it. Yes,
perfect, thank
we can
you.
see it.
And these are 4 fingertip-like bruises, right, to the person's arm in an area where they said they were grabbed. And you can see this with the naked eye. This is where we talk about even exposure, because if I'm shining the light on, and here I'm shining it in the 400s, 460, 480 range, in that green range, you can see this. You can see this the same as you can see it here, right? Just see it better. All these are just pores. This is nothing. I'm never going to say that's areas of absorption, but I'm going to say that this is a round area of absorption, but I've got a linear area of absorption here, and it matches where that ligature was. Okay, so yeah, that's what we see here. Because it's not all on the same flat surface, I'm not able to see these little ones because it's sort of down on the side. And so I would have to aim my ALS down to the side of their arm to be able to get those real clearly. That's why you're not seeing them real clearly on this. But again, that's how we would describe it, that we have a round area of absorption and what the size is, and we have a linear area of absorption. So what is injury detection, right? You can use this on very light-skinned people and very dark-skinned people. And the glory of it is that when you turn out the lights, everybody is green, right? Everybody, the light on the skin looks the same on everybody. And so we're able to do a better, a more improved, detailed assessment on all pigmentations using ALS, just for a more detailed description of what we're seeing, wound or otherwise. This was a real good case. This was a case of a security guard at a very, very expensive hotel who was following business women who, were at the restaurant or bar by themselves in town for business, and then later that night going up to their rooms with a pass key, and that was a serial rapist. And if they didn't have the bar over the door as that double lock system, was able to get in. And when one of the victim patients, we were able to see redness on their body. But you couldn't tell what it was. You couldn't see any type of detail, just that there was this diffuse area of redness in an area where a patient said that a shoe had held them down, and in an area that had tenderness. So we shined the light on this area at 420 wavelength, and this is what we found: detailed shoe prints. Again, totality of what we collect. It's included in the pictures. Detectives matched this up to shoes as well as DNA from suspect. And in its totality, that went forward. And I will tell you that I do work with not only prosecutors, but defense attorneys. I have a consulting business. So I all fair. We want everything out there on both sides to be able to find out what truth is and what really happened. And so we just include all of our ALS pictures for any way they can be used. This one was really valuable. This was another case that was really valuable. This was a African-American female who was strangled on a street corner, witnessed while her child was being taken from her. And it was witnessed having happened. Now, I have got an area of redness versus bruising to her right side of her trachea, right? The right side of the midline of her trachea here. And I've got some type of a bruise here, a red area to her left clavicle, okay, her collarbone. And I'm also with the eye able to see some dots, but I can't get pictures of them, like red dots, like petechial hemorrhage. Now, petechial hemorrhage is caused by pressure. Could be by choking, could be by strangulation, could be by having a baby, right? Not certainly in a patterned way, but other things can cause petechial hemorrhage in different parts of the body. So I can't get a picture of these dots that I can see. There's some here, you just can't see them really, really well. But look what I'm able to see at 480 wavelength. I'm able to see a patterned wound of what she was strangled with, okay? And I'm able to see this marking that I could see to the right side of her trachea. And I'm able to see this wound that I could see to her clavicle. But I'm also now able to see these little petechial hemorrhage dots a little bit better, just a little bit better. And so they're areas of absorption in my world. I'm not calling them hemorrhage. I'm not calling them bruises. It's what I believe them to be, but I'm calling them areas of absorption, right? In totality. Now, what I love about ALS and what I love about using it as part of my practice for 30 years and having thousands and thousands of cases is that I'm able to see things 30 days out. The longest I've been able to see something out is 32 days from the time of a known bruise. A known bruise. Not suspecting something happened. I'm not going into somebody unconscious. I'm not saying, oh, let's just look to see what your body shows. Yeah. What I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, we know you had a bruise here. And now, because you were held hostage, you weren't able to get in to have a medical examination, or because you were in fear, you were a human trafficking victim, didn't have access to medical care, or you were in a domestic situation where you were in true fear because you share a child, or somebody knows where you live or work, or what all the things, or you want a protection order and you go down to the magistrate or judge in district court and you show them pictures you took of your own body. And the judge says, I can't issue a protection order based on your own personal pictures. We've got to have more. We're seeing these patients too, coming up, being sent by judges to say, what do we see? And what we're able to see 30 days out is you can still barely see this wound here, right? And there's wounds that they had taken of themselves with huge bruises in that area. But look at what you're able to see on the right. Look at the more detail that happens to still be there, right? That is because it's broken down to that bilirubin stage and it's just being absorbed by the body and taken away as waste. And that's how you get rid of a bruise. That's what it is. It's still something there under the skin, but not necessarily able to see it so well. You all know that. You get injuries on your own body. So I'm going to call this still an area of absorption, and I'm going to describe it. So,
Hey, Debbie, we do have a
yes,
few questions. One says, when asked about what the areas of absorption are, do you say they could be wounds or are consistent with wounds?
I don't say either one. I say I've got an area absorption. And if I'm called in as an expert witness, then I'll opine to what that might be. But in my
Okay.
report, I don't put in, I don't do it. I don't think that's wise.
And then someone asked you that you're showing us the surface findings of redness or something similar. Do you document areas of absorption when you do not see anything on the surface of the skin?
Absolutely. If they've got if they're a historian to known trauma, uh, pain or discomfort, or past bruising to that area. Again, folks, I see people on ventilators and shock trauma every day. right? I'm not going in for those patients that I'm doing sexual assault exams on. And I am not going in there and ALSing their bodies and saying, oh, look at all of this absorption, because they're not telling me something happened to that part of their body, right? I believe that all of us in areas of using any form of technology or anything that we use in our tool belts have to stay in the lane. You have to stay in a certain lane. And I don't jump out of that. As much as it's assumed that I do, I don't. I don't. We call it an area of absorption where there is history of trauma to the body. Hope that
Okay.
answered that question.
Yes, there's a couple more. Someone said, when photographing ALS findings, what camera settings, filters, and barrier lenses do you use in order to ensure the photograph accurately represents what you observe with the naked eye under the light source? They said we
And
mainly use digital handheld cameras.
okay, and if you could remind me of that question, I'm going to do the whole end of this is photography, just kind of talking
Okay,
about the challenges with photography.
great. Then one more that comes into what you're already talking about now, I think, or two more. So regarding calling the defects areas of absorption, what else could it be other than hemorrhage?
I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes too.
Okay. And then how do you guard against a false positive finding of an area of absorption that it could be something else? Are you going to address that
I'm going to
also?
I'm going
Perfect.
to talk
I'll be
about that
quiet
in a
now.
minute too. Got it? Okay, perfect. All right, let's talk a little bit about published works. And I'm not going to say zip through this, but I'm going to go through this pretty quickly so we can get to some more stuff at the end. Yeah, so let's talk about some published works. Going back to 1992, we had West and their team that described that Stokes shift, right? That light hits the skin, it's reflected, it's transmitted, it's scattered, it's absorbed. All of that Stokes shift that we talked about. West used an Omniprint 1000 back in the day that had a dial on it between the wavelengths, and what they had on theirs was 450, 485, 525, and 570, and it had two bands and all white light. So that's what he had back in 92. And in a lot of these cases, he looked at fluorescence. He also described absorption. And he also talked about hemoglobin absorbing UV light waves through molecules and what absorbs and doesn't absorb UV waves. So like I said, ALS has been around a long time with people describing it and its use. And this goes back to 1992. Then in 2002, you've got Vogley. Dr. Vogley was a pediatrician who was doing child abuse cases. And in using the ALS that he was using, he had a watch on his arm. And it was one of those that clasped, and he had pinched the skin in his anterior wrist. And he had had a bruise at that spot, a pinch bruise. And it had gone away. Couldn't see it anymore. But as he's using the ALS on a patient, a child, for whatever reason in his assessment, it showed absorption in exactly that pattern on his wrist. And so it was an aha moment that I'm able to see things that I can't see in white light anymore, basically, is what he was able to show, that piqued his interest in doing his study. And again, what he showed was ultraviolet light, 400 nanometers and less, had the least penetration of the dermis. So the smaller the number, the less penetration. And if you get up to, oh my gosh, 700, you're really going to have deep penetration and be able to see things a little bit deeper in the skin. So that was the gist of his study. Talked about, again, the Stokes shift, right? Both of them did, West and Vogley, on all the things we've talked about. And in 2004 and in 2013, as far as a history of ALS, the Department of Justice published through the OVW a national protocol for sexual assault medical forensic examiners, and they've done this periodically. And what they stated is it's recommended, they've noted it is recommended for emerging technology to aid in the naked eye in visualizing trace evidence and subtle injury. They also noted that there's not consensus for using it for this purpose. So again, it is a matter of this is good stuff, folks. You know, disagreement and debate is how good turns to great. It's how we get excited about relevant future research, right? So that we can come together and it leads to decision and alignment. But there are some practitioners who still aren't sold on it. Okay, I get it. But I'm showing you what I'm showing you. You make your own determination about what you see and what you think its limitations are. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. In 2012, Dr. Lyman from Australia talked about visibility of injuries, and he used the ALS and he saw wounds, what he calls bruises, in 63 cases under 401 to 480 wavelength. Now, he was seeing absorption in 100% of the cases, but he called 11% of them must have been false positive because they didn't have tenderness to the area. And so what we wonder now is that maybe the tenderness is gone, like the bruise you don't see, but he was still picking it up at 480, a little bit underneath the skin. And possibly it was not a false positive. Possibly it was an absorption, because what we know now is when pain goes away and the bruise goes away, sometimes you still see something under the skin. And so that was his study in 2012. 2013, Dr. Katscafidi through Johns Hopkins used, and Jackie Campbell, who you all know, who I'm going actually when I leave here to lecture for her in her class at Hopkins. She designed the lethality assessment that the world uses now, and Dr. Dan Sheridan et al. And what they did was the best paintball study that we found to date by shooting in an IRB study 100 nursing students with paintball guns to inflict wounds. They used a colorimeter, which dermatologists use them. They used it from I think they got theirs from the Hopkins Library. It's used to date the date of yellowing of the pages. Yeah, as a librarian. And so they did it. And what they did was a formula to take all the pigmentation out of the skin. So they were working with 9 sets of pigmentation, and they put them in 3 categories. And they used the Specs Crime Scope because Dr. Sheridan happened to be working at the program here with me at the time. And so they followed these wounds out. After they would shoot them and a person would get a good bruise on their arm, they would follow them out. Now, when they did the publication that proved you can't date bruises and nobody bruises the same, that was the gist of the study. But it also showed that 30 days out, he could see it. Now, that couldn't go in the publication because it was not part of the IRB. So that you won't see ALS in this particular publication, but you're going to see it in later ones where they replicated that study. And then there was the study that I did with Dr. Chris Jackson. Dr. Jackson is our medical director. She is faculty at University of Maryland School of Medicine. And we did a retrospective chart review, right? And what we found in known strangulations where there was barely markings on the skin, but in patients that were 90% reported 2 of the following signs and symptoms: either petechial hemorrhaging, you could see, either vertigo or dizziness, loss of consciousness, loss of bladder and bowel control, headaches, shortness of breath, either at time of the assault or at time of the forensic examination. 32 were pre-syncopal, 118 were African American, 27 were Caucasian, and 7 were other. But what we found that 93% that had no, and very few of them had no injury. They were, almost all of them had something that you could see, but you just couldn't get a picture of it, right? They were described, 93% of the study number, 98% of those had positive absorption. Take away from that what you will, right? And detection was improved in being able to see things at 415 for 17%, at 450 wavelength for 56%, and at 5.15 for 6% of the people. And that became that article that we published in 2013, I think, which was that article that got this. It was like a tidal wave that went across the world that got this conversation started. And these, again, these are the reported symptoms that we found correlation between people who had absorption and strangulation cases. Then in 2015, Dr. Lombardi Cantor et al. Did a randomized control study, and they dropped marbles to a forearm to mimic wounds. It was a blind study, and they looked at those with inflicted versus no trauma. And their results were that, yeah, not sure about this ALS stuff. There's low specificity to latent wounds on individuals with no history of trauma, right? So we don't use it. We don't use it on patients who don't have a history of trauma. So that makes it sort of benign in my world. But when Dr. Lombardi came for Fry Reid, I think they were Fry Reid hearings back then, she did share that her inter-rater experience was less reliable because of the training people had in using ALS, and that the methodology may have been flawed because the marbles all didn't weigh the same, and in the way they were dropped, would it indeed always mimic trauma? And so that was the challenge for our city to deal with in that motion where we all testified. So then that raised some questions, folks, because like I said, we're into being open to what the research shows us. So it raised the question, defense attorneys would say to me, well, couldn't a topical agent have caused that area of absorption? And my answer, possibly. I didn't know. And how to best clean off any topical agent that must be there. So that led to the study that followed next after my chart review was published, where we tested 14 topical products. We had these cardboard cutouts with 14 holes on them, if you will, and Q-tips to apply all these different agents to somebody's forearm. And then we checked them with all the different wavelengths and all the different goggles, right? And what we found was that Maybelline True Match Super Blendable Makeup that had a lot of sunscreen could, in some cases, absorb. Well, that makes sense, right? Because what's the purpose of sunscreen? To create a barrier so those harmful rays out in the sun don't go down and cause cancer, right? Makes sense that there might be something there. So that led us to believe, great, what cleans it off better? Is it makeup remover? Is it soap and water? Or is it alcohol? What do you think? Didn't matter. They all clean the same. There's no difference in it. So we started at that point using soap and water. So I'm going to do I'm going to do a white light examination on my patient. I'm going to do an assessment and palpation and take pictures, all the things. I'm going to do an ALS to that area if they describe trauma. And then if I see something on ALS that's absorbed, I'm going to use soap and water in the form of baby wipes because it's really easy for us, or elder bath wipes. And we're going to cleanse that area, and we're going to repeat the ALS pictures, right? So that defined where that process changed for us. And that was good. That's what science and research is supposed to do. And so this is what this 2016 publication was. And these were the ones that we found that 81% of the time one product absorbed, and the rest of them weren't as statistically relevant, right? But that one product, that Maybelline with high SPF, could absorb. So it changed to how we practice now. Fast forward to 2020, and we have Dr. Scafidi, Sheridan, Downing, and Hyatt repeated that paintball study between Texas A&M and George Mason University. Again, you get 100 people, you shoot them with paintball guns, and you also do repeat that study of Lombardi, but this time when you drop it on their forearm, instead of marbles that there's no uniformity in their weight, you're going to use 6-ounce ball bearings, right? It's more consistent. And it was a controlled randomized study, and they examined how skin color impacted the result, the melanin, right? How that dark skin was going to impact the results. And they assessed these people 21 times over 4 weeks, and 95% of them returned. And they noted bruise detection being defined as discoloration at the site of the trauma. That's what they did in their study. I don't do that in my practice. I call it absorption. I don't call it bruises, but that's what they did in their study. And there were inter-rater checks. So it wasn't just one person's opinion. They combined expertise in looking at this. And they also used the Snellen chart to make sure these people could see, right? So I kind of like that. That was a real cool aspect that they added to it. And the results were that they saw things most of the time with 415 wavelength with yellow goggles. Next best was 450 nanometers with yellow goggles. But they also really looked into these goggles because I saw things best in what I published with orange goggles. But what they found was that when the manufacturers make the goggles, there's no consistent recipe, that they're made of a blend of yellow and orange. And some have a little more yellow and some have a little more orange, but they've all got some yellow and orange in them. And that's why there'll be a difference in what you see in yellow or orange. In the big picture, it doesn't matter because it's still absorption is absorption. So that's cool. And one of the other things that was really interesting is that absorption was visible on all 6 skin pigmentations after it was not visible to the naked eye. So why is that important? Why should you all care about that? It's because you're not guessing as to whether there was an injury. They inflicted the injuries. They saw the bruises. The patients or the subjects had discomfort, and they followed them through till you couldn't see it anymore. And now you could still see some absorption, right? Wicked cool, because they inflicted the injury. So it's not anything hypothetical in this. 2021, Jocelyn Anderson et al. Published a study that was done here at Mercy, I want to say maybe 2018. And the research question was, does all makeup look the same when it's viewed with ALS? Right? Does it all look the same? And again, what's the best way to remove it? So we knew that one makeup product with a lot of SPF absorbed. And so she did this cross-sectional study, again, 100 subjects, which is good. That's a good number for a study. And they were all healthy. It was a convenient sample. It was males and females. They looked at fluorescence and absorption. They looked at a bunch of different makeup products. They looked at all different wavelengths, 6 groups of all different pigmentations, red, yellow, and orange filters, goggles, if you will. And then they looked at, again, what removes things the best. And what they found was that makeup with sunscreen may produce positive absorption under ALS. Got it. All makeup products showed absorption in 10% of observations, with fluorescence in 10% of them as well. Okay, interesting. And after removal with soap and water or whatever, 4 products had statistically significant absorption. And again, after removal, one product had statistically significant fluorescence. Okay, so it's very interesting. So it lets us know you need to clean the area. But again, in a really rigorous study, the best removal method, there was no significant difference between makeup remover and alcohol and soap and water. So we stuck with soap and water. Then there was the Scafidi study that has been the last study that has been rigorous that I'm aware of. But then, I may be behind, so, inform me if I am, which was the last study with George Mason University, that it was an NIJ-funded, very rigorous study, control randomized, using ball bearings and inflicted wounds again. And what they did was they took 2 study sites. They took a study site that had used this for many, many years, and they took one that had never used it before. And in comparison, and there were a lot of relevant patient history. There was a lot of comparisons and data points, and they went through the records with a fine-tooth comb, including radiologic studies, CT angiograms, and all of that. They took a look at everything. It was controlled inter-rater, and they reviewed hundreds of charts. And they found that wounds were best seen in the 400 wavelengths, best seen with the yellow goggles again. And there were limitations, right? Based on, you need a relevant patient history. It's non-diagnostic, so we're not using it for medical diagnosis. Although we show it to practitioners, everybody sees it that's in a care team, but it's not being necessarily used for diagnosis. And it defines areas of absorption. Interpret that how you will. The bottom line, right? Bottom line. ALS shows absorption of light in what lies at the skin surface and the intra and subdermal levels underneath. What else can absorb light? I think this answers one of your questions. Tattoos, freckles, moles, skin discolorations, old age spots, if you will, hyperpigmented areas, right? Those deep folds on some of our obese patients. Some skin conditions, right? Psoriasis and some skin conditions like that. They can all be absorptions, right? But you can see them with the naked eye on top of the skin, right? So we generally don't get those confused with what. Let me just tell you, folks, after you look at 10,000 cases, you're able to distinguish pretty darn well what might be interesting as absorption and what is not, right? But these are not pattern markings that correlate to a forensic medical history, what we're describing in this absorption. And you've got this right picture that I'm showing here from this right publication that showed 200 wavelength to 900 wavelength and how deeply underneath the skin you can see things. So it kind of shows you're not seeing real deep at the 200 to 300 level. Basically, the 400 to 700, and I use 400 to 600 most often is where you're able to see things a little bit deeper. So remember, the waves are absorbed. Remember those light waves being absorbed, and the hemoglobin that you're able to see at 400s, and the bilirubin you're able to see up to 500s. Let's talk this fun case study for 5 minutes. So this is Dr. Dan Sheridan. In 2014, he's been a catcher on the old man's team, and I'm saying this tongue-in-cheek because I have a lot of respect for Dr. Sheridan. He's one of the leading wound experts in the world in publication and testimony and research. And he went to the Chicago's fantasy baseball camp because he's from Chicago. And he's been a catcher for years and years and years, and he's in his glory. And on day 2 of camp, he gets hit by a foul tip. Now, instructor, teacher, professor that he is, he takes a picture of it. Takes a picture of the ball that he got hit with, takes a picture of the wound on his arm, and we date it, okay, in that month, 2014. But then he comes later and he shows another picture on day 6. Now, let's go back. We don't see much the day it happened, right? You can see that central clearing in the middle. You can see that's where the hardest impact was. You're not able to see a whole lot. Well, we know in a progression of wound, as the body starts to clean it up, take it away as waste, as it's breaking down into hemoglobin, it's breaking down into bilirubin, and it's starting to turn from the purple to a little bit of the yellow. And you've got that ecchymosis. Ecchymosis is not a synonym for bruising. It's where you've got blood that will kind of like go to gravity or to point of least resistance. Like you get hit in the middle of your forehead and the blood will trickle down and maybe pool and you'll get raccoon eyes, right? And so that's what you're seeing going down here, because this is where he was struck, right here. Okay, and now it's all starting to kind of pool, ecchymotic spread. He comes back to Baltimore. He wants to see, can't see it very well with the naked eye. But clearly, we've had a significant wound here. So now we're 30 days out of this nasty wound that he's shown us. So white light, what are we able to see? Well, we're not really able to see much of anything up here. And that's where the impact was. But we are still able to see the ecchymotic spread that hasn't been absorbed and faded well. Now, show me grace, guys. Show me grace in your evaluations here, because our photography was not as refined as it is now, right? We didn't have all the skill sets. This is what we were able to show, right? All this area, you can still see where he was hit, and this area. All this you can still see 30 days out, as well as the ecchymotic spread. So this is what we couldn't hardly see with the naked eye now. This you can, but this you couldn't. But you still could see it on ALS. So what are the benefits of it? Cut and dry. It enhances the identification of wounds, or what you think is a wound seen by the naked eye. I'm not going to say that in a report. I'm going to say I've got absorption. It's going to enhance the identification of wounds, but that are difficult to photograph. I see a bruise, it's a bruise, but I want to see it better, right? It helps me do that. It makes a more complete documentation of assessment. It improves, how am I doing on time? It improves visualization of details and markings, right? That strap mark that we showed. Can locate foreign materials and debris that you might not be able to see with the eye. It provides equity and examination on patients who have a lot of pigmentation in their skin. Now, generally, we're seeing things between 415 and 520. We're seeing things with yellow and orange goggles. And what are the limitations? It's not a medical diagnostic tool by claim or research. Okay, I'm not going to tell you. I can tell you in court what I might think it is. I might opine in some cases on that, but I'm not going to tell you that in a medical report. I will tell you that our physicians and our advanced practitioners all look at the ALS, and a lot of times it determines studies they may want to order by what they're seeing, right? And it's because thousands and thousands of cases, they believe it's led to positive findings on their end, but I'm not saying that. That's not what we're using it for. And it will be argued that, it's not relative in the world of technology because it's imperfect. You're right. I am never going to get an IRB approval to strangle people, right? I can shoot them with paintball guns, but I'm never going to get an IRB approval to strangle 100 people and follow them through. So I'm never going to be able to do that study. I am never going to be able to cut open a live victim to see if there's a bruise that lies within. I'm never going to be able to do that, right? Gail Streck et al. Were able to do that with dead bodies and prove it, but I can't do that in my world. So, yep, I'm never going to be able to prove that. Could absorption mimic a topical product? Possible. Sure, it's possible. We know that from makeup and sunscreen. Experience level of your practitioners. We do multiple peer reviews to make sure that somebody isn't calling absorption something that's not, right? We're real careful about that. How strong is the power source somebody's using? That's a big factor. And sometimes the good ones are a little bit expensive. Now, I'm going to challenge any one of you on this elder gentleman who was witnessed strangulation, who I could hardly see anything with the naked eye. And this is what we saw at 460 wavelength to his neck. I'm going to challenge that he probably wasn't applying makeup. I'm going to challenge that this probably wasn't, and it was also a male doing the strangling, just for the record, that the male didn't have makeup with sunscreen smeared on his hand that he took and put on the guy's neck. But hey, trier of fact will hear all of that, and that's not my job. I'm just here to show you that I've got some powerful linear marks on the neck under 480 wavelength. And this is a more anterior view. Use this as you may, guys. Okay? I've got areas of linear absorption. So the challenge is photography. I've got a team of 34 nurses, advanced practice, residents, physician's assistants, not all nurses. And they got varying degrees of photographic expertise. They're not photography experts. And they sell a crime cam and one of these that has a ring on it that you can actually take the picture and use the ALS, which is fabulous, but it only does the low 400s. And so I can't use that for anything where I'm doing an assessment above 440, 450. So for me, that's not real effective unless I'm seeing the best the best findings with ALS in that range. Otherwise, I need to use a Nikon, and I do. And so that's most challenging. If you're going to implement this, the most challenging feature is photography. That's what we dealt with in our early days. Think about it. Look at that picture that we did of Dr. Sheridan and how kind of blurry it was, right? The baseball picture. Well, you think about it. I'm sitting here with a camera, okay? I'm moving and I'm breathing. I'm holding an ALS unit and I'm moving and I'm breathing. And I'm shining it on a patient who is moving and breathing. And you're taking pictures in the dark. We got to have the flash off. That's an absolute, or else you're introducing white light. And then that whole taking only one band of light, you're throwing that out the window. And so it's challenging. So you've got to be able to have a reduced shutter speed. You've got to have O-rings that whatever my lenses are, if I'm using an orange lens, if I'm using an orange goggle, then my camera's got to be looking through an orange goggle too. So I have magnetic O-rings where I'll slap an orange on there. Like I'm going to see a patient, I'm going to say, okay, hot dog, look at what I'm able to see absorbed under 480 orange goggles. That's the pictures I want to take. They're the best thing I want to take for absorption, right? So I'm going to slap an orange lens on my camera. Now I'm going to take off my goggles because it's too much, right? Having orange goggles on and then looking through this orange lens, it's a challenge. So I'll take these off because now I'm seeing it under the orange lens of my camera and have manual focus. Yeah. We use a Nikon on a tripod now with a shorter shutter speed, and it works really, really well. A lot of those clear photos, like that footprint on that hotel patient, that they were all done just with Nikons. Very inexpensive photography. Um, it might be too darn dark in a pitch black room, right? So sometimes we'll crack the door open as long as it's not shining on the patient. Just a little crack will let us be able to push the buttons and see things better on the ALS and the camera. Having a computer on and turning it away so it's not reflecting on a patient. If it's not real bright, sometimes that works. Again, taking off the goggles and just looking through the lens. Continue to use your traumograms to document anything you find, whether it's injury, whether it's wounds, whether it's absorption, whether it's fluorescence. Continue to use traumograms. They are the best thing that I can do for my patients because many, many times in my world, at least, I will tell you in all of Maryland, Eastern Shore and rural areas, as well in an urban setting, judges in each case will decide what pictures are allowed in and out of their courtroom as evidence. And so I always will document what I see as a true and accurate depiction of what I saw and assessed on a traumagram, whatever that might be. And ultimately, a trier of fact is who's getting the totality of everything that I'm sharing with you. But I am not inferring its wound. It's being put together at the time of that it goes to the state's attorney in my world. So, implications. ALS is a tool. It's one of many, many tools in our tool belt. It is not a magic wand. It has its limitations, but it has a real valuable benefit to patients and able to help see things better than you could without it. It's not medically diagnostic. However, we have been able to find 3 carotid dissections with ALS because of the bleed where it was. All of us on a care team look at all of everything that we collect. And yeah, 3 carotid dissections, just saying, but it's not primarily used for that, certainly. It's a different way of looking at something. But guys, I want to challenge your brain here a minute. Look at the doorknob in the room where you're sitting watching this presentation now. Look at a doorknob, pretty clean looking. I would challenge that if I went to that doorknob with a moistened swab and I swabbed that doorknob and I put that on a slide and put it underneath a microscope, might not be quite as clean as you think it is. Is it magic what I'm seeing swimming around under a microscope on a slide? No, It's a different way of looking at it. How about glasses? How many of you are blind as a bat without your glasses on? Might not be able to see a sign down the road. I might not be able to see words on a page. And I put my glasses on and I can see stuff, right? Is it magic? No, it's a different way of looking at things that are there. Just can't see them. I own a place on the beach. I go out and I'm sitting on a beach and all these people are making a big deal about the water and I can't see a thing. But I put on a different pair of polarized sunglasses and I look out at that water and now I see all these dolphins frolicking. Were the dolphins not there before? Is it magic? No. It's just a different way of looking at things. Guys, that's all ALS is. Keep it simple. Don't make this something that it's not. It has to be used in concert with a forensic medical history, with a physical examination, and again, I've said it 100 times, the totality of what we're doing. And if I have a finding, that means I saw some absorption. We'll figure out later and have people decide what they think that absorption is. Always remember to photograph. Always remember to swab, especially if they're touched, right? I'm going to swab before I clean the area for the second ALS series and document. And what do you document? Whether it fluoresced or absorbed. What was the wavelength that you saw it best with? What was the filter of goggle that you used to photograph it with, right? The goggle color. And any corroborating history that a patient victim has told you, right? So if they've got history of contact with somebody that they call an offender, and you're going to talk about positive findings, you might document it that way. Think about any other history that provided by our patient. I ask my patients, have you put on any topical things? Do you use any lotions or creams on this area? When's the last time you washed? When's the last time you bathed? And because again, sunscreen in whatever, and prior injuries to that area, right? So and people are good to tell you, oh no, that's from my cat. Oh no, that's where I fell over a coffee table. Oh no, that's whatever, right? But people are very, very good telling you if in the totality of what I see absorbing, what could be from their history of the assault and something else. Judicial implications. We have passed numerous motions for fry read. We don't use fry read now, they're Debra. Demonstrated to judges. What we do is we go in with the unit, guys. We walk into the motion and I come in and I bring the unit and I bring 12 sets of goggles for jurors and I bring the judge. And one was a really cool case because the judge says, yeah, come here, let's see it on me. And so I'm shining on certain parts and look at the AC space, and that's that inner elbow where you get your blood drawn. And I was able to say, oh, it looks like you've had your blood drawn, both arms. He said, how'd you know that? And I said, well, it's absorbing there. It's interesting. It's not a place I see hyperpigmentation in that crease. And it's got ecchymotic spread. Like maybe you had blood drawn and it's just being absorbed into the body there. He said, yeah, it was big old bruises, both arms. And now you can't see it anymore. See what I mean? It's about people interpreting this, how they're going to interpret it as far as relevancy in a body exam. And whether there's a history of trauma, again, stay in the lane. That's what we do. I explain and I teach. The trier of fact makes their own conclusions based on everything we've talked about. I think I've made it with 3 minutes. So we asked a lot of questions as we went. Here's my contact information. We've only got 3 minutes, so I can probably take 2 questions because I absolutely have to run at 4 o'clock.
Yes, thank you so much. We do have quite a few questions, and I know we won't be able to get to all of them. So if you have a question that you really want Debbie to answer, please send her an email. One question that I think is applicable to a lot of our folks on today is for rural departments, what would be a recommendation for a portable light that the officers could use that would not be cost prohibitive, something that would aid in photos or body cams?
That would not be cost prohibitive. You're going to have a minimum of
Me.
1,000. I'm
Oh
sorry.
yeah. No, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
You're gonna have to have minimum of $1,000 for a decent basic unit, right? I would say my last one, my most recent one is 32,000. Yeah, but it's great. It's powerful. So it works for us.
Okay. And then when photographing, oh, this is one I'd asked you a minute ago, and you may have already answered it. But when photographing LS findings, what camera settings, filters and barrier lenses do you use in order to ensure the photograph accurately represents what you observe with the naked eye under the light source?
Good question. If I'm using orange goggles and I see it best because we know about the difference between yellow and orange in the different goggles, I'm going to be using the same manufacturer's lens for my camera. So that what they're calling, what I'm seeing with a goggle that's orange is what I'm seeing when I put that lens on my camera, right? Other than that, they're all sold by the manufacturers and they're sold in packages. Many times, with the cameras, with the ALS system, I mean.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. I know that you have to scoot, so thank you so much, Deborah, for being here today. There are quite a few more questions, but feel free to email Deborah if you want to have a further conversation. I do want to share a link here, or the QR code, if you're interested in attending our conference in Dallas in May, and then also my contact information is there as well. So a recording of this will be available at a later time on our website, and we hope that you'll look out for our next webinar next month. So thank y'all for being here. Have a great day.
And please email me with these questions because I'm looking at some of them and happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you.